For reaction 1, we're going to be dissolving sodium hydroxide in water. To do that, we're going to need a piece of glassware. So I'm going to go to the stockroom and I'm going to get a 50 milliliter graduated cylinder. If I click on this, it will add that graduated cylinder onto my workbench. Now we're going to need some water, so I'm going to go over to the stockroom and under solutions, I'll click on the water. So now I've got distilled water and a graduated cylinder, and I need to fill up that graduated cylinder with water. So if I take the water and place it over top of the graduated cylinder until I see that green plus sign, I can then add 50 milliliters of water. And I'm going to add that like this and pour that in there, and there we go. Now I've got 50 milliliters of water. So we've got that. The next thing we need to do is get some solid sodium hydroxide and weigh it out. So I'm going to go to the stockroom, and under tools I can get a scale, and the scale is what I'm going to use to measure my sodium hydroxide. The next thing I need to do is find that chemical. So if I go to solutions here and under solids, here's my solid sodium hydroxide. Clicking on that will add it to my workbench, and then I need to get a weigh boat. We never measure chemicals directly onto a scale. We need to use either a weigh paper or a weigh boat to collect that material and make sure that we can transfer everything and not make a huge mess. So I'm going to go to the stockroom, and under a glassware here, under other, I can get a weigh boat. So there's my weigh boat. It's appeared on the screen here, and I'm going to place that on top of my scale. And you can see that the weigh boat has a mass, and I need to tare the scale so that I'm not including the weight of the weigh boat when I am figuring out my chemical. So pressing the tare button makes my mass 0.00. Everything is zeroed out. And then I'm going to add this sodium hydroxide to the scale. So again, dragging it on top until there's a plus sign. And for my demonstration, I'm going to add 1.50 grams of sodium hydroxide. You're going to be adding 1.00 grams, but I'm going to use this as my demo. So I've got this right here. I clicked on the pour feature, and now I see I have 1.500 grams of the sodium hydroxide. Now to move this around, I'm going to have to disconnect the weigh boat from the scale. And now I have my 1.50 grams of sodium hydroxide. Now to do this experiment, we need a calorimeter, and in this case, we're going to use a styrofoam cup. So if I go to glassware and I find the foam cup, I can add it to my workbench. And what I need to do is I need to pour 50 milliliters of my distilled water into that foam cup. So again, dragging it on top, I'm going to transfer that 50.00 milliliters, pouring that in there. And once I have that, I now have my 50 milliliters of water, and you can see the initial temperature of this water is 25.0 degrees Celsius. Now what I need to do here is I need to rename this cup. So I'm going to rename this as Brent Reaction 1. Rename it, and that proves that I'm actually doing this experiment. So I've got my water right here. The next thing I need to do is add that sodium hydroxide to the water, and I'm going to watch the temperature change. So here we see that the temperature is 25 degrees. You can actually see it over here as well. And when I add the chemical, this is going to change the temperature of this water in my calorimeter. So I'm going to take the sodium hydroxide, I'm going to place it over top, and I'm going to record the maximum temperature or minimum temperature that I see as a result of this reaction. So I'm going to transfer 1.0 grams in my case. You will be transferring 1.00 grams. I'm going to pour that, and take a look over here. We reached a different temperature, and the temperature of the water is now 32.94 degrees Celsius. So I would record this final temp inside of my data table in my lab report. So I've got the initial temperature, I've got the final temperature, and the temperature change, and I should also include a sample calculation below my table. So that is part 1, reaction 1 for sodium hydroxide being added to water. My final step will be taking a screenshot of my screen. There's different ways to do this depending if you're using an Apple computer or a Windows-based machine, but take a look at that and make sure that you're recording the entire screen right here and including that as picture 1 in the appendix of your lab report.